A name sometimes rises from the shadows of forgotten tales. A name that sends a shiver through the very fabric of old Scotland. Sawney Bean. It's a name synonymous with a chill that creeps deeper than any winter wind, conjuring images of something unspeakable, hidden just beyond the flickering reach of the hearth's last light. Picture, if you will, the wild, untamed coasts of Galloway, where jagged cliffs meet the restless sea, and isolated paths wind through desolate moors. Here, the legend whispers of a savage, a man who, alongside his own kin, forged a horrifying dominion of terror. For decades, they say, this clan vanished travelers, their monstrous hunger devouring not just possessions, but the very essence of those who crossed their path. But the reality of such a medieval horror, far more nuanced, far more unsettling than you might at first imagine. How could such a pervasive evil remain hidden for so long? What quiet rhythms of unimaginable depravity could sustain such a family? This is the story we will gently explore, not with sensational screams, but with a measured breath, a quiet descent into the heart of a terrifying tale. We will trace the whispers of disappearances, the mounting, quiet dread that settled over a landscape, and the chilling allegations of methods so abhorrent they defy easy comprehension. This is the story of Sawney Bean and his family, a historical lullaby of horror, always interesting, never demanding too much, allowing your mind to drift as the shadows lengthen. So, before you settle in, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always intriguing to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Perhaps light an incense or two for that soothing fragrance. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. In the quiet hush of the 16th century, when the world moved with a slower, more deliberate pace, a young man named Alexander Bean, who would become known to legend as Sawney, made a choice that would echo with chilling resonance through the centuries. He was born in East Lothian to a life of toil, of manual labor, of honest, hard-won sustenance. It was a life of quiet rhythm, dictated by the turning of the seasons and the demands of the land. But for Sawney, this was a life he felt no kinship with, a path he instinctively recoiled from, seeking something fundamentally different. Instead, he found a kindred spirit in a woman, equally inclined towards a life outside the established rhythms of settled society. Together, bound by a shared aversion to conventional living and perhaps a nascent desire for a wilder freedom, they made a profound decision: to retreat, to vanish from the known world. This wasn't merely a move to a remote cottage or distant farm. It was a deeper, more profound pursuit of isolation. Their chosen sanctuary was a vast, sea-carved cave along the rugged, desolate coast of Galloway, a place where the wild elements held sway. Imagine this cave, a gaping maw in the cliff face, its entrance often obscured by the churning tide and the crashing waves, its depth stretching for more than a mile into the very bones of the earth. This was to be their sanctuary, their hidden world, a place where the laws of man and the gentle hum of civilization held no sway. Here, in this damp, echoing darkness, away from the distant clatter of hooves over cobblestones and the comforting murmur of human voices, they began their quiet descent into an existence defined by its utter detachment from society. A new rhythm, almost imperceptible at first, began to assert itself in their lives within the cave. It was a rhythm like breath, slow and deliberate, adapting to the shadows and the isolation, to the ebb and flow of the tides, and to the raw, untamed nature that surrounded them. The need for sustenance, always present, always demanding, began to twist and contort from its conventional forms. Honest labor and trade were abandoned. Instead, they turned their gaze outwards, to the desolate landscape that stretched beyond their hidden lair, and the unsuspecting souls who traversed it. A quiet, terrifying cycle was beginning, fueled by the utter absence of oversight and a complete detachment from any moral compass. This was not a sudden plunge into depravity, but a gradual, almost imperceptible slide, much like the slow, persistent erosion of rock by the ceaseless waves. Here, away from all eyes, the seeds of an unimaginable horror were quietly sown. At first, it was merely whispers carried on the wind, fragmented, easily dismissed. A merchant expected an heir for a crucial market day, who simply never arrived. His wagon, perhaps found overturned and empty on a lonely stretch of road, hinting at a mishap, or perhaps nothing at all was found, leaving only an unnerving void. Then, a farmer returning from the bustling market, his pockets laden with the day's hard-won earnings, vanished into the twilight without a trace. These were not grand, dramatic disappearances accompanied by shouts or struggles. They were quiet, unsettling vanishings, like stones dropped into a deep well, leaving only widening ripples of unease and a growing, unspoken question mark in the hearts of those left behind. The rhythm of life in Galloway, a daily cycle of work, eat, rest, and repeat, began to feel subtly, unsettlingly altered. The local communities, accustomed to the occasional perils of travel, the threat of common bandits, the harshness of the elements, the unpredictable furies of nature, found themselves grappling with a new, inexplicable fear. There was no struggle heard echoing across the moors, no cry for help that carried on the wind. Simply, an absence. And in that absence, a growing, pervasive sense of dread settled like a cold mist over the land. The air, thick with the familiar scent of damp earth and wood smoke from distant cottages, began to carry a different, heavier weight, laden with unspoken anxieties. What truly deepened the mystery and relentlessly fueled the quiet terror was the utter lack of evidence left behind. No bodies were ever found. The land remained silent, revealing no secrets. No discarded possessions that might offer a clue were discovered. It was as if these unfortunate souls had simply dissolved into the mist, swallowed by the very land itself. The Bean family, hidden deep within their cavernous lair, had perfected a gruesome and terrifying method of ensuring their grim secrets remained buried. Their alleged consumption of their victims meant that the most crucial piece of evidence, the body itself, was meticulously, horrifyingly, erased from existence. This left only a void, a chilling silence where a life once was, deepening the enigma and allowing the true horror to remain unimaginable to the wider populace. The frost chewed at fingertips and toes of those who searched, but they found only cold earth and the vast, indifferent sky, offering no comfort or answers. The roads less traveled, once merely remote, now became the most dangerous, imbued with a silent menace. Those venturing alone, or in small, vulnerable groups, through the isolated stretches of the Galloway coastline, unknowingly entered a silent hunting ground, a territory claimed by unseen predators. They were drawn into the quiet, insidious web spun by the Bean family, becoming but another stitch in the horrifying tapestry of their existence. For these travelers, it was a day like any other, setting out on a familiar path. But not quite. A day like any other, until the quiet, horrifying message of their fate came not through words of violent sounds, but through an echoing, empty silence that swallowed them whole. The quiet disappearances, once sporadic and easily dismissed as unfortunate accidents or the work of common highwaymen, began to morph into a more frequent, more unsettling pattern, a relentless drumbeat of loss. A single missing traveler could be explained away, absorbed into the inevitable dangers of the road. But when weeks turned into months, and the list of the vanished grew longer, reaching a disturbing, undeniable number, a profound, chilling fear began to settle over the local communities. From a mere unease, a nagging suspicion, it escalated, gently and steadily, into a pervasive panic that touched every household. The whispers grew louder, though still hushed, imbued with a deep-seated dread of the unknown, of an enemy that left no trace. The rhythm of their lives, once predictable and comforting, now carried an underlying, chilling discord, a constant note of apprehension. Travelers, particularly those who had no choice but to traverse the desolate stretches near the coast, the very heart of the mystery, began to alter their routes, seeking safer, albeit longer, detours. Many chose to travel only in larger, more protective groups, armed and vigilant, finding tenuous safety in numbers. Others, gripped by paralyzing fear, chose to avoid the area altogether, severing vital links between communities. The economic life of the region, dependent on the free movement of goods and people, began to falter, quietly and almost imperceptibly, choked by the tendrils of fear that tightened around every road and path. In the crushing absence of concrete answers, when reason failed to provide solace or explanation, fear bred a fertile ground for superstition and wild rumors to flourish. Tales of malevolent spirits, of mischievous fey folk snatching travelers into their hidden, otherworldly realms, and of dark, ancient curses began to circulate by the flickering light of peat fires, passed from trembling voice to trembling voice. People spoke of things that lurked in the deeper shadows of the moors, of unseen forces that preyed upon the unwary, twisting their imaginations into terrifying shapes. Yet, even in their most vivid, most terrifying imaginings, none of these desperate rumors likely approached the horrifying reality of the Bean family's activities. The truth was far more monstrous, far more human, and concealed within the silent, damp depths of a coastal cave. The very air seemed to hold its breath, waiting, watching, a silent witness to the unseen horrors. His hands, always raw from the cold, his boots, always damp from the moorland paths, symbolized the constant, chilling presence of fear. But the fear, it was always present, a cold knot in the gut of every soul who had to walk those lonely roads. It was a low-key pathos, a quiet struggle that resonated with every individual, a shared burden of terror. Within the shadowed embrace of the Galloway coastline, a chilling routine began to solidify, a rhythm of terror orchestrated by the Bean family. Their intimate knowledge of the rugged terrain was not merely a comfort but a potent weapon, a silent advantage that allowed them to melt seamlessly into the landscape, to anticipate and ensnare the unsuspecting. They knew every hidden path, every treacherous boggy stretch, and crucially, the places where the wind howled loudest, its mournful cry drowning out any faint cry for help. It was here, in these desolate and isolated pockets, that their brutal ambushes unfolded with chilling precision. The family, growing steadily in number with each passing year, possessed a terrifying and overwhelming advantage, sheer force of numbers. A lone traveler, perhaps a weary merchant leading a laden pack-horse brimming with goods, or a solitary pilgrim on a quiet journey of devotion, would suddenly find themselves overwhelmed. The attacks were characterized by their swiftness and extreme violence, leaving little to no chance for escape or even a desperate struggle. It was an element of chilling surprise, a sudden, overwhelming flood of attackers emerging from the very earth itself. One moment, There was the quiet rhythmic creak of wagon wheels or the steady plod of hooves. The next, an abrupt, crushing silence. The world would shift, abruptly and irrevocably, from the mundane and predictable to the utterly monstrous. They worked with a horrifying efficiency, a grim expertise honed by years of repetition and unpunished depravity. The sheer numerical superiority of the assailants ensured that their victims were quickly subdued, silenced before any alarm could be raised, before any distant villager might hear a cry for help carried on the wind. The violence they employed was not born of a frenzied, chaotic rage, but rather a cold, practiced necessity, a means to a horrifying end. It was the quiet, methodical work of predators, meticulously ensuring their grim harvest was secured without complication or undue attention. The distant clatter of hooves over cobblestones, a sound of life and movement, would fall silent forever for those caught in the Bean family's snare. This quiet tension, the sudden, overwhelming force of their attacks, became the terrifying hallmark of their reign of terror. Their approach deliberately focused on the human experience of the conflict, the initial shock, the overwhelming sense of dread, and the abrupt, brutal end of a journey, rather than a rapid-fire description of the conflict itself. This allowed for a lingering sense of unease, a pervasive fear that permeated the very air of Galloway. The low-key pathos of a lone traveler encountering such unexpected savagery resonated deeply, leaving an indelible mark on the landscape and the collective psyche. To truly comprehend the chilling depth of the Bean family's depravity, one must, gently, endeavor to picture the alleged interior of their vast, hidden cave. It was not merely a dwelling, a simple shelter from the elements, but a gruesome pantry, a horrific larder carved directly into the living rock of the coastline. Imagine the pervasive, cloying scent that would have filled the air, thick with the familiar smell of damp earth and wood smoke from their crude fires. Yes, but overlaid with something far more sickening. The unmistakable, metallic odor of death and decay, meticulously managed but never entirely absent. It was a smell that would cling to the very fabric of their existence, a constant reminder of their monstrous diet. Here, in the perpetual twilight that barely penetrated the cave's depths, signs of their horrific diet would have been omnipresent and undeniable. The crude methods of preserving human flesh, perhaps salted and hung from hooks like ghastly cuts of meat, would have been a constant, visual testament to their abominable lifestyle. This was not a sudden act of barbarity born of desperation, but a slow, practiced ritual, a daily routine of unspeakable horror. Discarded bones, grim testaments to countless vanished lives, would have been scattered amidst the damp rock, refuse, and rudimentary tools. It was a macabre still life, a tableau of human suffering transformed into sustenance, chilling in its mundane horror. The cold, indifferent walls of the cave would have silently borne witness to these unspeakable acts, absorbing the quiet horrors within their very stone. The cycle within the cave was horrifyingly simple, yet profound in its barbarity. It began with the hunt, the meticulous planning, the patient waiting. Then, the ambush, swift and brutal. Next, the quick, efficient subduing of their prey. And finally, the grim return to the hidden sanctuary, where the true work of butchering began. This was no act of desperation born of starvation or dire need. It was an established routine, a deliberate, continuous cycle of violence and cannibalism that defined their very existence and identity. The sounds within would have been muffled by the thick rock walls, the quiet scraping of crude implements, the steady drip of moisture, and the almost imperceptible movements of a family entirely consumed by their monstrous enterprise. And amidst this gruesome routine, the personal belongings of the victims would have been carelessly discarded: a worn leather purse, a distinctive buckle, a shard of pottery. These small, mundane objects, once intimately connected to a vibrant human life, now lay as silent witnesses, grim markers of lives gently, brutally cut short. They were the only lasting echoes of those who entered the shadow of a Galloway and never returned, their stories ending in this hidden abyss. The air inside the cave, thick and still, would have pressed in, heavy with the weight of unseen horrors, a chilling contrast to the wild freedom of the world outside. The boy missed his mother most at night, when the walls stopped whispering and silence pressed in, a testament to the cave's pervasive dread. The cold, hard reality of the cave, always present, always demanding, served as a constant reminder of their utter detachment from any recognizable humanity. His hands, always raw, his boots, always damp, but the cold, always present in the cave at night. The true horror of the Sawney Bean legend, the chilling detail that truly magnifies its impact and cements its place in folklore, lies in the sheer, unimaginable scale of their alleged atrocities. This was not a single, isolated act of violence, nor a brief, frenzied spree that would eventually bane itself out. For over 2 decades, the legend claims, the Bean family operated with near impunity, the hidden existence allowing them to accumulate a staggering, horrifying tally of victims. Hundreds of souls, vanishing without a trace into the desolate landscape of Galloway, their disappearances fueling a creeping dread across the region. Imagine the quiet, almost imperceptible creep of this number, growing year by year, season by season. A single missing person is a tragedy, a localized sorrow. A dozen vanishings ignite concern and suspicion, prompting a crisis within communities. But hundreds, this level of sustained violence, this continuous cycle of hunting, murdering, and consuming human beings, defied normal human comprehension and pushed the boundaries of what was conceivable. It was an evil so profound, so alien to the established norms of society, that it could only be explained away through desperate superstition and wild, fearful whispers. The human mind, in its attempt to make sense of the incomprehensible, would struggle against such a terrifying reality, finding it easier to attribute to supernatural forces. Disease swept through the population, leaving quiet grief, much like the quiet grief left by these inexplicable disappearances. The sheer audacity of it, the cold, methodical nature of their crimes, speaks to a complete severing from humanity, a descent into a state of existence entirely detached from empathy, remorse, or any form of moral compass. It was a dark, enduring stain on the quiet rhythms of the Scottish lowlands, a constant, underlying threat that poisoned the very air. The story, even as a legend, serves as a stark reminder of the potential for ultimate depravity when the chains of civilization and compassion are utterly broken, revealing the abyss that can open within the human soul. It is a story designed to linger, a quiet tension that refuses to fully dissipate, focusing intently on the human experience of this underlying threat, rather than on the sharp escalation of direct confrontation or graphic detail. It presents a terrifying tapestry woven from absence and fear, with each missing thread representing a life quietly, irrevocably, consumed by this monstrous family. The battlefield was a horrifying tableau of fallen men, and similarly, the Galloway coast became a horrifying tableau of vanished lives. This quiet hum of historical discovery was constant, a pervasive sense of dread. It was a testament to a unique, albeit terrifying, form of human experience, one that pushes the boundaries of belief and challenges our understanding of good and evil. The sun, A gentle warmth on her back illuminated the winding path ahead. Elara, a young mother with eyes the color of the moorland heather, hummed a quiet tune as she guided her sturdy pony along the track. Nestled in a basket beside her, her infant son, Thomas, gurgled contentedly, occasionally reaching a tiny hand towards the dappled sunlight filtering through the sparse trees. They were on their way to visit her sister in a distant village, a journey she had made countless times before. The simple hopes of their trip were modest: a warm welcome, shared laughter, and the comfort of family. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke, a familiar comfort that promised nothing but peace. The rhythm of their journey was measured, steady, and unhurried, much like the gentle flow of a river. This was a world still deeply connected to the land, where travel was an intimate dance with nature, not a hurried rush. Elara dreamt of the fire's warmth that awaited her, the soft beds, and the shared bread that would nourish both body and spirit. Her thoughts were of home, of the gentle rhythms that shaped lives centuries ago, the planting, the harvesting, the quiet communion of kin. The distant clatter of hooves over cobblestones, a sound she associated with safety and the steady coming and going of honest folk, was a comforting reassurance. But on this isolated stretch of road, far from the comforting murmur of human voices, a subtle shift in the atmosphere began to occur. It was not a sharp, sudden alarm, but a quiet tension that built gradually, almost imperceptibly, like the tightening of a string. The feeling was akin to a silent drawing in a breath just before a sudden, terrifying release. The usual sounds of the moor, the rustle of heather, the distant cry of a curlew, seemed to fade, replaced by an unsettling hush that portended something ominous, something deeply out of place in the tranquil landscape. Then, without warning, the world erupted. It wasn't with a shouted command or dramatic declaration, but with a swift, overwhelming rush of figures emerging from the dense thicket by the roadside. It was a sudden, brutal attack, a chaotic swirl of shadows and rough hands. Elara cried out, a sound caught in her throat, as she instinctively clutched Thomas closer, her body becoming a shield. Her sturdy pony, startled and terrified, reared violently, whinnying in panic, throwing the basket holding her precious child to the ground. She fought, with the desperate, primal strength of a mother defending her young, kicking and struggling, her only thought to shield her infant son. But the sheer numbers were against her. The element of surprise, combined with the overwhelming force of the attackers, swiftly overpowered her. The world tilted, spun, and then plunged into darkness, the last chilling sound she heard being a muffled cry, not her own, but her beloved son's, fading into the terrifying silence. The transition from the sunlit world of hope and journey to the cave's depths was abrupt and jarring, a violent plunge into a realm of suffocating darkness and foul, pervasive odors. The air within the cavern was thick with the chilling scent of decay, of damp earth, and something far more grisly, the undeniable stench of death and stale blood. Elara found herself dragged along, her body bruised and aching, into the echoing maw of the cavern, its immense size only amplifying her terror. Her initial shock, a numbing disbelief that this horror could be real, slowly gave way to a dawning, bone-chilling realization of the family's true, monstrous nature. The whispers of the missing, the strange, unsettling silence that had settled over Galloway for so long, now coalesced into a horrifying, unspeakable truth laid bare before her eyes. The Bean family emerged from the deeper shadows of the cave, their grotesque appearance amplifying the terror. Their faces were smeared with grime and dirt, their hair matted and wild, and their eyes held a disturbing, detached emptiness, devoid of any recognizable human emotion. This was no simple band of opportunistic robbers. This was a family utterly severed from humanity, a self-contained unit of depravity. The unsettling signs of an incestuous bond, though unseen by Alara in that moment, permeated their unsettling behavior, a silent depravity that resonated in the very air of their lair. Their movements were crude, their gestures animalistic, and the casual brutality with which they lived their daily lives was a constant, horrifying spectacle. The fear that consumed Alara was not just for her own life, a terror she could scarcely comprehend, but a crushing, overwhelming dread for the ultimate fate of a stolen child, her infant son, Thomas. She was forced to witness their daily existence, a nightmarish routine that played out in the cave's perpetual dim light, illuminated by flickering, smoky torches. She observed the crude butchering of their latest victims, the methodical, almost ritualistic preparation of human flesh for consumption. The sight, though carefully described with euphemism and cautious language in the legend, imprinted itself on her mind with a horrifying clarity, a mental scar that would never heal. It was a constant, gruesome cycle of consumption, an endless feast of human lives, and Alara was merely another silent, terrified observer trapped within their horrifying world. The sounds of their existence, the low murmurs, the tearing and scraping of flesh, the chilling quietude of their movements, all echoed in the vast, damp space, trapping her in a waking nightmare from which there seemed no escape. This was a deeper context, a new layer of the nightmare, built upon the initial terror. The constant, gentle hum of historical discovery had become a terrifying, macabre drone of unspeakable acts. The air inside the cave, thick and still, pressed in upon her, heavy with the weight of unseen horrors and the pervasive stench of death. Each moment stretched into an eternity, marked only by the drip of water from the stalactites and the chilling sounds of their grotesque activities. She was a silent prisoner, forced to bear witness to an evil so profound it defied comprehension, her every breath a testament to her ongoing torment. The cold, hard reality of the cave, always present, always demanding, served as a constant reminder of their detachment from any recognizable humanity, a chilling microcosm of ultimate depravity. Despite the crushing weight of disappearance that threatened to extinguish her very soul, a flickering ember of defiance, a desperate mother's primal instinct, stared within Alara. She watched, she waited, seeking any glimmer of hope, any small opportunity to escape this living tomb. Her gaze darted around the cavern, searching for a weakness, a lapse in their grotesque captor's vigilance, perhaps a narrow crevice in the rock that offered a sliver of impossible light leading to freedom. Her mind, though reeling from the constant onslaught of horrors, clung to the faintest possibility of reclaiming her child, of breaking free from this nightmare and returning to the world of light and humanity. This was her subtle challenge, her internal struggle, a quiet depth of spirit that refused to be entirely extinguished, without ever resorting to sharp, dramatic escalation. But the labyrinthine depths of the cave, combined with the ever-present, almost animalistic vigilance of the Bean family, proved an insurmountable prison. Every desperate, silent attempt at finding a way out, every furtive glance towards a potential escape route, was met with the cold, unyielding reality of her utter captivity. The rhythmic, almost lullaby-like quality of the cave's dampness, the constant drip of water, and the distant, muffled sound of the restless sea only amplified her terror, trapping her in a trance-like state of dread from which there was no awakening. The walls of her prison seemed to press in, suffocating her with their cold indifference. The chapter, a tragic vignette serving as a powerful and emotional anchor for the legend's pervasive cruelty, would then conclude with the family's final, brutal act, a grim culmination of Elara's ordeal. The quiet legacy of their inhuman cruelty would be etched into the very fabric of the cave itself, a permanent stain on the hidden depths, and into the fabric of the legend. The precise details of this final horror are not for explicit description, but their impact is profound and devastating. A life poured out onto the ground like spilled wine. Another innocent existence gently, brutally cut short in the suffocating darkness of their lair. It was the ultimate demonstration of their monstrous nature, a final act of barbarity that left no doubt about their utter inhumanity. The mother's desperate struggle, her ultimate and inevitable failure to save her child, cemented her tragic fate and that of her infant son in the unyielding darkness of the cave. It was a quiet end, a silent horror, another statistic in the terrifying reign of the king of cannibals, whose family left only absence and dread in their wake. The silence pressed in, heavy with the weight of countless vanished lives, a chilling testament to the unspeakable evil that once festered beneath the ancient lands of Galloway. His boots, always damp from the cold, his very being a testament to the quiet, ceaseless work of unspeakable evil. For decades, the silent terror of the Bean family had cast a long, unyielding shadow over the Galloway region. Travelers simply vanished, leaving behind only whispers and growing fear, their fate sealed in the depths of a hidden cave. Yet, even in the face of such overwhelming, unseen horror, the human spirit sometimes ignites with a spark of desperate defiance. The legends, often born from the desperate need to understand the incomprehensible, speak of those rare instances when a victim, pushed to the very brink of terror, found the inner strength to fight back, however futile the ultimate outcome might have been. These were not grand battles, but visceral, fleeting struggles for survival, moments that would later fuel the quiet resolve of others. Imagine a scene: a lone rider, perhaps a hardened Highlander with a weathered face, suddenly beset by shadows emerging from the desolate landscape. Instead of succumbing instantly, he might have drawn a dirk or swung a heavy staff, landing a desperate blow against his assailants. These legendary acts of resistance, though often ending in the same grim fate as others, were crucial. They were tiny, fragmented pieces of a puzzle, highlighting the sheer brutality of the family's attacks and the raw, unadulterated desperation of their victims. Such moments, rare and terrifying, began to subtly break the impenetrable veil of silence that had long protected the Beans. These weren't triumphs, but quiet struggles against overwhelming odds. Perhaps a traveler, ambushed on a narrow coastal path, managed to inflict a wound, leaving behind a telltale smear of blood or discarded, broken weapon that hinted at a struggle. Or perhaps, in the chaos, a potential victim narrowly escaped the clutches of the Bean family, fleeing into the night with fragmented but terrifying tales. These near misses, these whispered accounts of a shadowy, numerous assailant, began to paint a clearer, albeit still horrifying, picture of the danger lurking in the Galloway Hills. The rhythm of their lives, once dictated by endless quiet disappearances, was now subtly punctuated by these desperate, fleeting acts of defiance. Such narratives, woven into the fabric of the legend, serve to underscore the quiet strength of the human will even in the face of unimaginable evil. They are subtle shifts in the narrative, a glimmer of the outside world pushing back against the insular horror of the cave. These accounts, passed down from fearful whispers, slowly solidified a terrifying truth. This was no random misfortune, but a deliberate, organized terror. The velvet hook, here, was the quiet suspense of these struggles, inviting the listener to consider the profound human experience of fear and resistance. For decades, The vanishings had bred superstition and wild rumors, none quite grasping the horrifying reality. But then came the turning point, a moment where the chilling whispers finally gained a voice, a tangible shape. The legend tells of a pivotal individual, a survivor whose sheer strength and determination allowed him to fend off the monstrous Bean family and escape their clutches. Imagine his journey, traveling alone, perhaps a merchant returning from a distant fair, his mind occupied with the mundane calculations of profit and loss. He would have been ambushed with the usual swift brutality, the sudden overwhelming force of the family descending upon him. Yet, this traveler, unlike so many before him, possessed an indomitable spirit, or perhaps simply a stroke of unimaginable fortune. He fought with a desperate ferocity, fueled by a will to live that transcended the terror. The severity of the attack would have been profound. The odds he overcame nothing short of incredible. He may have been left for dead, bleeding and broken, but crucially, he was alive. He crawled, he stumbled, he pushed himself through the desolate landscape, carrying not just his wounds, but a horrifying truth that had long been suppressed. His account, delivered to the astonished authorities, would have been the first concrete evidence, the first unvarnished glimpse into the monstrous truth that had haunted the region. He spoke of a multitude of attackers, their faces obscured by the shadows, their movements chillingly coordinated. He described the sheer force, the overwhelming numbers that had descended upon him. Most crucially, he would have relayed gruesome details, not of specific wounds, but of the sickening intent behind the attack, the cold, inhuman efficiency. This testimony, fragmented but terrifying, finally lifted the veil on the unspeakable fate of the missing, transforming vague fear into a horrifying certainty. His words, carried on the wind like a chilling prophecy, would have been a catalyst. This was the true breaking point, the moment the quiet, underlying tension of the region erupted into open outrage and a desperate need for answers. The information was rich enough to pique our curiosity, but presented in a way that was never dramatic, overly sensational, or rapidly paced. It was simply a factual, terrifying account that demanded action, bringing the full, horrifying weight of the unseen into the stark light of day. The horrifying tale of the lone survivor, a story of an evil so profound it stretched the very bounds of human comprehension, could not be contained. It traveled swiftly, carried by desperate couriers and the shocked whispers of the populace, until it reached the highest echelons of power, the court of King James VI of Scotland. The king, renowned for his stern justice and his unyielding commitment to law and order, was allegedly seized by personal outrage upon hearing the gruesome details. This was not merely a matter of common brigandage. This was an affront to God and man, a blot upon his kingdom that demanded swift and brutal eradication. His response was immediate and decisive. King James VI launched a large-scale manhunt, a military expedition of unprecedented scale for such a localized threat. Hundreds of men, armed and resolute, were dispatched to the wild, rugged coasts of Galloway. They were accompanied by bloodhounds, their keen senses trained to pick up the faintest lingering traces of human presence, a silent promise of relentless pursuit. This royal decree transformed the quiet, fearful search of local villagers into a systematic, overwhelming force, demonstrating the king's unwavering determination to bring these perpetrators to justice, no matter the cost. The landscape, once a silent accomplice to the Bean family's atrocities, now became a hunting ground. The royal expedition scoured every inch of the coastline, leaving no hidden cove, no dense thicket unexplored. The bloodhounds, their noses to the ground, followed the faint, chilling scent of discarded remnants, of human presence tinged with something profoundly unnatural. The hunt was methodical, relentless, driven by the king's vengeance and the horrifying testimony that had finally broken the long silence. It was a pattern break, a subtle shift from passive fear to active pursuit. Then, inevitably, the scent grew stronger. Following the unerring instincts of the hounds, the king's men were finally led to the hidden maw of the Bean family's cave, its entrance obscured and almost invisible from the outside. The discovery within was a visceral confirmation of the most horrifying legends. The butchered remains, the signs of unspeakable practices, all laid bare in the damp, echoing darkness. It was a shocking revelation, a gruesome tableau that confirmed the monstrous reality that had been concealed for so long. The velvet curtain had been torn away, exposing the full, chilling extent of their depravity. The chilling tale of Sawney Bean, with its gruesome details of cannibalism and decades of unseen terror, has embedded itself deeply into the popular imagination, a testament to its compelling horror. Yet, for all its vividness and widespread notoriety, a critical examination reveals a curious and unsettling anomaly: the complete absence of any mention of the Bean family or their monstrous crimes in any official Scottish legal or historical documents from the period in which they allegedly operated. This silence is profound and striking. For a family alleged to have murdered and consumed hundreds of victims over 2.5 decades, one would expect extensive records of trials, royal proclamations, local investigations, or at the very least, a passing reference in the chronicles of the time. The conspicuous lack of such records casts a long, unyielding shadow of doubt over the legend's historical veracity. This profound historical silence raises an intriguing and fundamental question. If the legend of Sawney Bean is not a historically accurate account of events, then what is its true origin? If there is no tangible evidence of their existence or their horrific reign, how did such a detailed and terrifying narrative come to be so widely known and believed? The disconnect between the vividness of the story and the emptiness of the historical archive compels us to look beyond conventional historical records and explore other avenues for its genesis. It's a quiet puzzle, a historical anomaly that demands careful, non-sensational consideration, inviting the listener to ponder the nature of truth in folklore. Consider the implications of this historical void. If hundreds of people vanished into the Galloway mists, leaving behind no bodies, no clear evidence, and yet generating widespread panic that allegedly reached the ears of the king, surely such a crisis would have left an indelible mark on the historical record. The absence suggests either an unparalleled cover-up, which itself is highly unlikely for the period, or that the events, as depicted, simply did not occur. It's a silence that speaks volumes, challenging the very foundation of the legend's claim to historical fact. The velvet hook, is the intellectual curiosity about how such a pervasive story could exist without documented proof. This unsettling anomaly forces us to approach the legend not as a straightforward historical account, but as something far more complex, a powerful narrative, a cultural phenomenon that perhaps tells us more about the fears, beliefs, and storytelling practices of the past than it does about literal events. The cold, hard reality of the historical record, or lack thereof, serves as a quiet counterpoint to the terrifying narrative, inviting deeper reflection on the nature of truth in fiction and legend. His hands, always raw from trying to grasp the elusive truth. If the historical record remains silent, where, then, did the terrifying narrative of Sawney Bean originate and gain its initial traction? The answer appears to lie firmly in the burgeoning literary landscape of the 18th century, a period that witnessed the rise of a new and highly influential form of popular literature. These were sensationalist pamphlets, chapbooks, and broadsides, cheaply printed, easily distributed, and designed primarily to entertain and shock the burgeoning reading public rather than to meticulously document historical events. These were the direct precursors to what we now recognize as true crime, a genre that thrives on the extraordinary, the macabre, and the deeply disturbing. The story of Sawney Bean first appeared in these very publications, suggesting it was born from a desire for compelling narratives that could enthrall and horrify. This era saw a profound public fascination with crime, particularly those that pushed the boundaries of human depravity. Authors and publishers of these popular tracts understood this hunger for the sensational, often embellishing existing tales, combining disparate anecdotes, or fabricating stories entirely for dramatic effect and commercial success. The grotesque image of a hidden, cannibalistic Scottish clan, a family beyond the pale of civilization, was an irresistible subject for these publications. It provided a powerful blend of horror, mystery, and primal fear that resonated deeply with the anxieties of the time, making the legend a product of its literary environment. The air was thick with the scent of cheap paper and printer's ink. Furthermore, the socio-political context of the 18th century, particularly the often strained relationship between England and Scotland following the Acts of Union in 1707, offers another significant lens through which to view the legend's widespread adoption. During this period, English literature frequently portrayed Scots in a stereotypical and often negative light, as wild, barbaric, untamed, and sometimes even uncivilized. The horrifying narrative of a cannibalistic Scottish clan preying on unsuspecting travelers would have served as powerful propaganda, subtly reinforcing these negative stereotypes and perhaps undermining any Scottish claims to sophisticated nationhood or moral standing. It was a narrative that played into existing biases, a quiet instrument of cultural shaping that subtly influenced perceptions. Thus, the tale of Sawney Bean, while terrifying on its face, may be less a factual historical record of monstrous acts and more a deliberate cultural artifact designed to fulfill multiple functions, to entertain a public hungry for sensation, and perhaps to serve as a tool of political and cultural othering. The lack of concrete, corroborating evidence, far from diminishing its power, instead highlights its profound role as a fictional construct designed to evoke fear, reinforce prevailing societal perceptions, and capitalize on the burgeoning market for sensationalist crime stories. It was a quiet engine of myth-making, perpetually interesting without ever demanding too much. Despite the compelling arguments against its historical authenticity, the Sawney Bean legend has not only endured but thrived for centuries, continuing to captivate and terrify audiences across generations. This enduring appeal lies in its profound ability to tap into our deepest, most primal fears, transcending its disputed origins. It speaks to the universal human dread of the unknown, of the monsters lurking not just in the shadows of desolate landscapes, but in the untamed, unacknowledged corners of human nature itself. The chilling idea of a hidden, savage clan operating with impunity, a dark mirror reflecting humanity's potential for depravity, remains a potent source of unease, a constant, gentle hum of historical discovery that resonates with our innate anxieties. The legend serves as a powerful, albeit fictional, cautionary tale, echoing ancient fears of the wild, untamed wilderness and the dangers that lurk beyond the comforting glow of the hearth fire or the protective walls of society. It reminds us that even within the perceived safety of civilization, there exists a terrifying capacity for unimaginable cruelty and a descent into barbarity. This quiet tension, this constant underlying threat, keeps the story alive in our collective consciousness, allowing the mind to wander and drift, not into slumber, but into contemplation of the darker facets of human existence, all without ever demanding a sharp, jarring peak of drama or overt sensationalism. It's a low-key pathos that lingers long after the telling. The Cannibal King has, perhaps inevitably, transcended its humble origins as an 18th-century sensationalist pamphlet and infiltrated the very fabric of modern horror, influencing countless works of fiction across various media. From the raw, visceral terror of films like Wes Craven's The Hills Have Eyes, which openly acknowledges its direct inspiration from the Bean legend, to numerous books, comics, video games, and even unsettling urban legends, the core narrative of a hidden, inbred, cannibalistic family preying on outsiders continues to resonate with contemporary audiences. This pervasive influence demonstrates the lasting power of a well-told, albeit unsubstantiated, tale to inspire new horrors and explore universal themes of survival, savagery, and the thin veneer of civilization. Ultimately, the enduring legacy of Sawney Bean is not one of factual historical horror, but of a powerful and deeply ingrained cultural myth. It reveals a great deal about the fears, the prejudices, and the storytelling traditions of the past, and indeed, of the present. It is a testament to the human fascination with darkness, with the allure of the monstrous, and with narratives that explore the deepest taboos. Whether true or not, the legend of Sawney Bean remains a chilling reminder of the fine line between civilization and savagery, a quiet, enduring echo of fear that will continue to whisper through the ages, perpetually reminding us of the dark corners of the human psyche. His boots, always damp from walking through the marshlands of myth and memory,